fellow bassists, welcome back. So I'm gonna start with a bit of a bombshell here and tell you that when you watch a great musician play an improvised solo, they're not actually improvising, or at least not as much as you might think. I don't speak Spanish, and if I went to Spain and tried to improvise some Spanish, they would have no clue what I'm saying. And this analogy fits pretty well with music. If I just picked up an instrument for the first time and tried to improvise a solo over a complex jazz chord progression, the audience probably wouldn't enjoy it very much. I like to know some vocabulary and grammar before I try to improvise, also known as licks and music theory. Today I'm going to show you 3 pretty basic music theory concepts, but more importantly, I'm going to show you really clear and easily understandable ways to practice each of those concepts. If you practice the exercises that I give you and then also practice improvising with those concepts, you're going to find yourself much more comfortable with improv. So the first concept is diatonic arpeggios. Now you might be thinking, arpeggios, that's so basic and I already know that. And that's probably true, but do you know all of the diatonic arpeggios in every key so well that you can improvise with them fluently? Here are all of the diatonic arpeggios in E minor. I'll play them over a rock backing track that I created. You should just practice running through those arpeggios every day until they feel completely second nature to you. Once you've got them so down that it's basically automatic, then you can start improvising with those arpeggios. You can get creative by changing the rhythms, playing the arpeggios in a different order, or only playing certain notes from the arpeggios, kind of like this. So, not a bad solo for using just one improvisation concept. Notice how I didn't tell you to play certain arpeggios over certain chords. That's because I want you to just experiment with playing arpeggios over any of these chords and then use your ear to determine whether it sounds good or not. As long as you're playing arpeggios that are within the key of the chord progression, then it's going to sound at least okay. The next concept we'll look at is diatonic triads. I love using triads in improv because there's just so many rhythmic variations you can do with them, and they just sound so great in rock. Also, a lot of people just assume that triads are really boring and basic sounding, but if you play, say, a G major triad over a C major chord, you're actually playing the 5th, the 7th, and the 9th, and those are, you know, other than the 5th, the 7th and the 9th, there's some pretty interesting and modern sounding notes. So here are the diatonic triads in E minor. Like with the arpeggios, practice those every day until they're second nature to you. Then practice improvising over the progression using the triads creatively. Here's an example. Just like with the arpeggios, I would actually recommend not worrying too much about whether you're playing an E minor triad over the E minor chord or a C major triad over the C major chord. For now, just try experimenting with the diatonic triads over any of the chords and just use your ear to determine if they sound good or not. As you might have heard in my example, I was playing some 7ths and 9ths here and there just by using triads, and it sounds honestly more interesting than just always playing the triad that fits the first 3 notes of the chord at that time. All right, the last concept that we'll look at is scale patterns. Every chord in this progression fits the E natural minor scale. So that means that if we just play E natural minor, any of the notes will sound probably at least okay over any of the chords. But obviously just running up and down the E minor scale sounds really boring and exercisey. So here are some scale patterns to make things a bit more interesting. Nice, so that's all of the concepts. Once you've got really good at each of these concepts in isolation, the end goal is to combine all of these. If you play a solo and you only use one of these concepts, it is difficult to make it not sound like an exercise, so you got to combine all of them to make things sound musical. It'll take a lot of practice, so do make sure to be patient. You're not going to sound like your favorite bassist just overnight, but it is really fun to practice this stuff and notice that you're improving at your improv on a weekly basis. So here's an example that's built almost entirely off of the concepts that we talked about today, which are arpeggios, triads, and scale patterns. So there you go, a pretty decent sounding solo that only uses 3 basic improv concepts. If you want to master these skills, make sure to download the free tabs and backing tracks for all of these exercises and concepts on my Patreon, because these really help me so much when it comes to improv, and I want you to get the same benefit. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you found this helpful. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.